started. So good afternoon and welcome. The January 31st, 2025 special meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is now 12:05 p.m. Central Time. We need to make certain findings on the record regarding the necessity for conducting today's meeting by electronic participation without a physical quorum present. In accordance with Tennessee Code Annotated Section 8-44-108B2, as Chair of the Board of Trustees, I offer the following facts and circumstances in support of a finding of necessity for the Board of Trustees to conduct its January 31st, 2025 meeting without the physical presence of a quorum, even though I think we may have one actually. The board is scheduled to take up important matters which require timely action by the board, including to receive information regarding higher education entities and the declaration of financial exigency, and to evaluate the board's quarterly meeting calendar. Participation by electronic means is necessary due to the travel schedules of many of the board members, the importance of the matters being discussed, and the need to discuss and take action on these matters expeditiously. Is there a motion for the board to find participation by a quorum of the Board of Trustees by electronic means of communication necessary?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The question is on the motion to find that participation by a quorum of the board members by electronic means of communication is necessary. Secretary Brown, please call the roll.
Trustee Chapman? Trustee Smith
Yes.
Knight? Trustee Smith Knight? Trustee Norfleet?
Yes.
Trustee Qualls?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Young-Sigler?
Yes.
The motion carries. We will proceed with the meeting with the quorum present. Board members, if you cannot hear or speak to the other board members, please state so. And for each board member participating electronically, if there are any individuals who are present in the location from which you are participating, please identify them. Okay, thank you. The proposed agenda for today's meeting is contained in your board materials for the meeting. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as contained in the board materials. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, the question is on the motion to approve the board meeting agenda for today's meeting as contained in the board materials. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed?
And Chair, because we have someone participating electronically, we'll need to do the roll call vote.
Okay, well, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Chapman?
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet?
Yes.
Trustee Qualls?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Young-Sigler?
Yes.
Trustee Smith Knight is not here. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is approved. Well, I want to say good afternoon to everyone, Board of Trustee members, faculty, staff, students, and other distinguished guests. First, on behalf of Interim President Tucker, faculty, the Board of Trustees, and all of the TSU family, we would like to send our heartfelt condolences to the family of a fallen tiger, Mr. Derek Cody. Please know to the family that we are all here for you during this difficult time, and we are sending tiger love in hopes that it provides comfort and peace. We will take a small moment of reflection now. Thank you. Thank you all. Second, I want to thank you again for being here today. I appreciate your time and dedication to Tennessee State University during this critical period. As we gather to discuss the financial challenges facing not only our institution, but other institutions of higher learning, I want to emphasize the importance of transparency, collaboration, and strategic planning. Our university has a proud history of academic excellence and community impact. However, we are now confronted with significant financial challenges that require immediate and thoughtful action. This meeting is an opportunity for us to come together, share information, and explore opportunities and solutions that will ensure the sustainability and success of TSU. I want to be clear that this is an informational session. The Board of Trustees will not be taking any financial action, but we will take some time to address a term that was new to me up until about 6 months ago, and that is financial exigency. It has been said that education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. So today, we will learn as much as we can, learn about what financial exigency means, why do higher education entities declare financial exigency, what steps have to be taken, if any, as we prepare for our tomorrow. Our goal is to engage in an open and constructive dialogue to enable the Board of Trustees and the university to be able to make informed and strategic decisions. I want to assure you that the Board of Trustees is dedicated to preserving the integrity and mission of Tennessee State University. We are confident that with your cooperation and understanding, we can overcome these challenges and emerge even stronger. Today, we have a distinguished guest that will lead us in a discussion regarding these steps that a university must navigate for financial exigency. Our discussion today will not be TSU specific focus, but we'll be focused on learning as much as we can about the process to make our strategic decisions in the future. But before I turn it over to Trustee Smith to introduce our distinguished guests, we have another distinguished guest with us today to share a few words, and that is Interim President Tucker.
Thank you very much. We're off to a very good start this year with the spring enrollment. We're overachieving our budget. A lot of great things are happening in terms of resetting some of our processes. The whole financial aid department has done a great job of resetting our system, and I'm really looking forward to the fall when that process becomes a world-class process as opposed to the challenges that we've had in the past. So a lot of exciting things happening at Tennessee State University, and I appreciate your support.
Well, thank you. The next item on the agenda is regarding revised TSU Board of Trustees 2025 calendar year meeting schedule. And we are discussing this now because we did not have this discussion back in November. We all agreed that we would go over our calendars to ensure that the trustee meetings are set timely. So the current dates that we have scheduled are March 13th, 14th, June 12th and 13th, September 18th and 19th, and November 20th and 21st.
Excuse me, Chair Winston.
Yes.
Is it possible, I know we didn't do this on the agenda and it's a point of order, can we move this agenda item to the end of the agenda to allow, more discussion from trustees that may be coming? Or
We can. I think she's on the phone and can add her, but I'm fine either way.
That's fine. We can do that.
Okay. Well, I will turn it over to Trustee Smith.
I would, do we need to?
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah, I move that we move agenda item 5 to after the training session, agenda item 6.
Second.
Roll call. Trustee Chapman?
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet?
Yes.
Trustee Quall?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Young Sigler?
Yes.
And we have Trustee Vasquez with us too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Deanna McCormick will be presenting our training today. She has served as a higher education chief financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer for more than 3 decades. She worked with both public and private institutions where she was responsible for finance and investment strategies, building long-range financial forecasting models, IT, HR, facilities planning, and developmental and auxiliary operations. Since retiring in 2023, she has worked as a consultant for the National Association of College and University Business Officers. Ms. McCormick, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. You stole a little bit of my thunder for my introduction, but that works just fine. The one item that you did not mention that I will allude to because I think it has some bearing on what I'll talk about. I have been a chair and peer reviewer for the Higher Learning Commission for the last 17 years. And that's the accrediting body for nonprofits, profit institutions, and public institutions across the 19-state region in the central. Most recently, I have conducted visits with colleges who either have declared as exigency or who are on the verge of doing so. So I'm hoping that I can impart some data and some wisdom to help you make a decision here. You know, higher education is a big business. We generate about $700 billion in expenditures annually, employ 3.5 million individuals. Every American city has at least one prominent university, and in small communities, colleges are often the major employer. This by far is not the first time higher education has seen hard times. You may remember the dot-com bubble from the late 90s, the 2008 housing crisis and the following recession, and then what happened? The pandemic. Many institutions were facing hard times before COVID, and the influx of government funding gave many a false sense of security. Previous strategies have been to grow your way out by adding new majors at the undergrad, at the graduate level, increasing athletic programs, making large investments in building and renovation. However, rather than helping with net revenue, what they found, they often failed to pay for themselves, often forcing the acquisition of new debt with debt service that's unwanted. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda today. You're all aware, or you should be aware, of the climate for higher education. Between 2017 and 2022, enrollment as a whole declined by 1.8 million students, and approximately 40 million Americans had attained some college but had not attained a degree. Because of these enrollment declines, competition for students is becoming more pronounced, causing increased discounting of tuition revenue and a decline in net revenue received from students. State budgets in many instances are struggling. State appropriations to public institutions have been declining since 2008. A large system in California that I recently consulted with is expecting a decline. Well, they froze their appropriation for fiscal 25, and now they're expecting a decline in appropriations of $375 million for fiscal 26. Student persistence, retention rates, graduation rates are declining in large part because of the increasing cost of an education, contributing to increased student debt. 79% of college presidents agree one of the most pressing issues is the mental health of students and the lack of campus support systems such as advising, tutoring, and a close connection to faculty. The Higher Education Price Index, which is called the HEPI, measures cost increases in higher education. When compared to the Consumer Price Index, HEPI has been approximately 2 percentage points higher because of our fixed costs for salary and benefit. Public confidence in the value of an education is waning, especially with parents who consider that a degree doesn't guarantee their student a well-paying job. And the number of industries that have declared they do not require a college degree, such as Google, IBM, and Microsoft is growing. Deficits are growing because there's a lack of cash to meet current obligations, such as payroll, short-term and long-term debt. Deferred maintenance is estimated by the Association of Physical Plant Administrators in Higher Ed to be $112 billion and growing. There simply isn't sufficient cash to support these deteriorating facilities. Audit findings, deficit financial statements, and an assessment as to whether an institution remains a going concern are a source of increased financial monitoring by accrediting agencies. And the federal government is stepping up to say, how can you give an institution accreditation or reaccredit them, and then months later they close? So let's delve.
Can I just interrupt you for a second on that point in terms of the accrediting bodies?
Mhm.
What are you seeing some of these accrediting bodies do? Like, what is I guess I'm trying to figure out what's the best you can see, and then what's the worst that we can see?
Well, what I'm seeing, and I do several visits for the HLC a year. Actually, I'm going to present on college closures at the annual meeting this year. Times are hard. I mean, times are tough across the board, and it causes the accrediting agency to want to step in and get closer. And as I said, the Fed is starting to crack down and say, how can you accredit them? And then 3 months later, they close. So it's increased monitoring. It's increased campus visits. It's just getting harder and harder for both the institutions and for the accrediting agencies to monitor.
Thank you.
As we move on, well, let's see. Now I'm a little behind. I'm sorry about that. If you look at enrollment, and it's interesting for you, if you look at the expected increase in high school graduates, Tennessee looks pretty good. Watching enrollment trends at the state level can heavily influence where recruitment dollars are spent. It can also heavily influence where other institutions come in with recruiting dollars and steal your students. But these two graphics depict where there will be declines. Some are significant by those states most affected. Also, where the number of high school graduates are expected to increase. Southern states tend to fare better, as you can see, than the Midwest and the Southwest. But interestingly enough, racial differences will be significant, changing considerably by 2040. White students are projected to decline by 26%, Black students by 10%, Asian students by 22%. Two categories of students expected to increase are Hispanic students by 16% and multiracial students by 68%. And according to the Forbes research, the effects of the pandemic will be felt for many years to come. Let's talk a little bit about state appropriations. And I had a conversation with someone when I came in that was telling me that the state of Tennessee has had a very stable budget and has been able to increase appropriations to their institutions, which is very positive because a number of states just have not been able to do that. Some states suffer from such large deficits that they're unable to fund higher education at levels seen just 5 years ago. State support is critical to keep the cost of tuition down, pursue enrollment growth, and to achieve student persistence, retention, and attaining their college degree. It's important to note state appropriations for financial aid are also critical, as students and parents are concerned, as I mentioned before, about the level of debt. During fiscal year 23, states allocated approximately $116 billion to higher ed. By 2024, it was the third largest spending category for states in general, increasing 3.6% over 2023. And I mentioned confidence in the value of the college degree. These three research organizations, I'm sure everyone's heard of Gallup. 36% of Americans were confident in higher education in 2023, That's down from 57% in 2015. The Pew Research Organization says 40% of Americans say that a four-year degree is not important to get a good job. 49% of Americans say a degree is less important than it was 20 years ago. The Lumina Foundation, they find that 70% of working-age students will need a degree or other credential beyond high school to fill market needs. Higher ed will need to adapt, and I'm sure that you've heard the saying that we are trying to educate students today for jobs that don't even exist yet. So let's talk about what is financial exigency. Financial exigency, in simple terms, is a formal declaration signifying a severe and imminent financial crisis that threatens an institution's ability to fund core academic and operational function in both the short and long term. It signals that a drastic reduction in expenditures is necessary for the college's health and survival. Financial exigency essentially means the university as a whole, demonstrated by evidence, is such that financial resources from all sources are insufficient to support existing programs and pay the full compensation of faculty and staff. It could be compared to a bankruptcy in that it allows for right-sizing the labor force and re-examining and realigning product lines to meet consumer demand. This action entails making significant budget reductions by eliminating programs and services, reducing the number of faculty and staff, and often restructuring and or merging academic programs. As you will see when we review the case studies, I polled 3 institutions that were somewhat radically different yet very similar. Many institutions declaring exigency suffered from budget deficits, dwindling cash reserves, declining enrollment, all over the course of a number of years. Cash has been strained to the point where making payroll is sometimes in question, as well as deferring accounts payable, resulting in late payments to vendors. The infusion of federal funding as a result of COVID also gave institutions a false sense of security, especially small private colleges. Many had done retrenchment, reduction exercises, and those things just found their way back into the budget. Also, for public institutions, state appropriations have been reduced as a result of state budget deficits, but not so much here. Several large state public systems have started to reorganize operations and eliminate low-performing campuses within their system. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, those are examples where states can no longer starve their flagship campuses to fund inefficiencies at other campuses. Research shows that a reduction in state appropriation can severely harm student persistence and progress toward a degree. And as I mentioned, because of the fierce competition for students, institutions have increased their average institutional aid awards, such as unfunded scholarships. What an unfunded scholarship is a reduction to tuition revenue. There has also been little future planning as to the sustainability of financial aid awards. Intuitively, heavier discounting should lead to increases in enrollment. Parents and students do not have an understanding how discounting impacts their net price, leading some not to consider an institution because they feel the published price before financial aid is just too expensive. We'll talk a little bit about what are the myths around financial exigency. Institutions that declare exigency are destined for closure. Absolutely not. University communities often interpret this declaration as a precursor to closure, when in reality, financial exigency can help institutions avoid shutting down. It allows leaders to restructure their cost bases, pay off unmanageable debts, or close unsustainable deficits. Moody's in 2015 actually argued that financial exigency can be credit positive for universities in financial distress, since it signals a leadership team's commitment to improving long-term financial sustainability. Another myth, financial exigency violates shared governance and ignores the faculty perspective. Many faculty worry that exigency bypasses shared governance by enabling leaders to make significant changes to academic programs and staffing without their consultation. According to most institutional policies and to the AAUP, which we'll talk about shortly, faculty must be involved at every stage of the exigency process, starting with the initial review of an institution's financial health. Another myth, exigency allows institutions to rapidly reduce academic costs. Many leaders think financial exigency will enable them to immediately scale back academic costs. However, the process of declaring financial exigency and making associated budget reductions can be time-consuming, and cost savings can take at least a year to materialize. Typically, the president and a large number of faculty and staff must review credible financial and academic program data, seek input from campus leaders and faculty, and solicit and receive board approval before declaring exigency.
Hey, Dee, sorry to interrupt you again, but I want to lean a little bit more in terms of the rapidly reduction of academic costs. You mentioned that it typically takes about a year to materialize. So on average, would you say that at what point could savings initially even begin to start? Is it absolutely a year, or can people see something immediate, and then the maximum of it happens in a year? Like I'm just trying to think through what that process looks like.
I think this is more focused on the reduction in tenured faculty, because typically what I have seen institutions do is pay them out over the course of a year. No, I mean, there are immediate things that you can do to reduce the budget, reduce your expenses, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too.
Okay.
So no, a year is not an absolute number.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But institutions typically form a financial exigency committee and other academic and non-academic committees as deemed appropriate by the university community. And finally, financial exigency allows institutions to immediately revamp their academic program portfolio. Although exigency enables institutions to scale down or discontinue existing programs, it can hinder new program launches in the short term due to the restrictions imposed by the accrediting agencies. Anytime you want to launch a new program, it has to be approved by your accreditor. Anytime you want to add another location to your campus, it has to be approved by your accreditor. Accreditors often require institutions to develop what they call teach-out arrangements, so that current students in discontinued programs can complete their course of study or transfer to other institutions. Teach-out plans take time and require additional costs. Institutions may have to delay new program investments. So the bottom line, financial exigency is an important mechanism for restoring an institution's financial stability in the face of serious sustained crisis, but it should be avoided as a unilateral or quick fix to a temporary condition. So what do you consider when you think about declaring exigency? Determining how severe the financial position is paramount to making the decision. College and universities that have delayed the decision too long have only found the situation worsens to the point where there is no other alternative than closure. In either situation, faculty and staff lose their jobs. Decision to reduce faculty and staff need to be made based on accurate and reliable data and are not easy to make. That's why the most successful institutions, as you will see, and there's one that I will talk about that I really consider stellar at this effort, utilize an ad hoc financial exigency committee prior to making the declaration to involve as many campus constituents as are practical in reviewing resource management, to assess financial condition, consider alternatives, and the impact of reducing administrative positions and expenses, as well as activities that are not supporting the academic mission and students. Under AAUP's academic freedom standards, which we'll review later, colleges and universities must, in quotes, meaningfully involve, unquote, faculty when considering faculty and program reductions. Many institutions have little faculty participation other than perhaps budget committees or monthly reports to the faculty senate. Some get reports on a quarterly basis. Communication across campus is critical and should be honest and realistic, with the development of a fair and deliberate process for the restructuring that needs to occur to ensure financial success in the future. Any other questions before we move on? I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you today.
I do. Can you go back when you talked about schools that are governed independently versus schools that are part of the systems and the rate of declaration that you see one of the other? So if you're a school that's in a system, then they choose to support maybe the larger schools and siphon from the smaller schools. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit more insight on what you've seen for independently governed institutions like us?
I think it's more likely, based on the research that I've done, that independent universities declare financial exigency more frequently. Because what you can do when you have a large system, you can think, well, a student only wants to drive 5 miles to take a class. But what they find out is, well, if we eliminate that campus and they have to drive 15, they will do it. So I think it's more prevalent in independent institutions.
And the second question that I had was related to new programs. I just want you to go back over and talk a little bit more. Just because you declare exigency, that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily bring on a new program.
Correct.
Okay.
And you have to be, I think, very cognizant of the faculty reaction, where you're eliminating my program, but you're bringing this program on. And you need a lot of advanced notification for your accrediting body, because they have to be involved from the get-go, really. The more that you have them involved early on, the easier it is to do. But think, too, as you're trying to reduce costs on one side by eliminating some programs or schools or whatever, and then you're putting money into launching new programs, so it's kind of a catch-22.
In your experience, where have you seen that work?
I have not seen that at this point in my experience. I've been looking at financial exigency in institutions with HLC for the last couple of years, and I have not seen that. But it does happen. I'm sure it does happen. Mm-hmm. So what do you need to consider? Oh, let's talk about shared governance. Where am I at here? We think of governance as a model where faculty, staff, administration, and sometimes students, when appropriate, participate in decision making. Shared governance is most prevalent in institutions of higher education and healthcare as a mechanism to involve many campus constituents in data sharing and decision making. Shared governance also has to contribute to shared responsibility, in that the collegial model used by universities that emphasizes collaboration of academic and non-academic staff. AAUP refers to shared governance as the joint responsibility of faculty, administration, and governing boards to govern colleges and universities. Differences in the weight of each group's voice on a particular issue should be determined by the extent of its responsibility for and expertise on that issue. The most successful shared governance models include several principles. Ethical conduct involves honesty and integrity and being fair and respectful to everyone in the university. Ethical conduct can also create a positive work environment and move an institution more toward consensus. Transparency involves open communication about the institution's goals and strategies to achieve those priorities and communicates progress to goal attainment. Being transparent requires disclosure of all relevant information so that others can make informed decisions. It also involves holding everyone accountable for their role in governance and being open to diverse perspectives. Building consensus seems to be more important to higher ed than to corporate America. Involves departments working toward a shared vision for the future while building on the human capital, enriching relationships, and sharing credit where credit is due. Constituent engagement and collaboration are critical in keeping folks well informed about the university's finances, even providing academic and support program level data. And of course, campus-wide communication is critical. Keep as many constituents informed as possible. And my research shows that when constituents are involved, especially when understanding institutional finances, there's a higher probability many will step up when challenged with difficult decisions to achieve what is in the best interest of the institution. Thank you. Okay, my slides were out of order. No worries. I mentioned the AAUP policy, and for those of you that don't know the acronym, that's the American Association of University Professors. And they began looking at exigency a little differently than other experts on the subject. Way back, I think it was 1925 when they had their first policy. But their policy says, and I quote, "A severe financial crisis that fundamentally compromises the academic integrity of the institution as a whole and cannot be alleviated by less drastic means," unquote. And I have a reference. I have 3 slides or 4 slides at the end with some reference material where you can look at actually what AAUP says in detail. Highlights include full disclosure to faculty as to the reasons for declaring exigency based on relevant data and analyses to justify the action is not acting like the situation is worse than it really is. Now, faculty can request a formal hearing or a formal investigation into the insight of university finances and should be involved in the budgeting process, as I mentioned before. Also, AAUP talks about institutions that can be censured. And essentially what that means, and you'll see that in one of the case studies, they come out and they say this institution is violating academic freedom and tenure policies, which is not a good PR statement for any institution. And I pulled this out as well, which talks about academic tenure. Termination of permanent long-term appointments because of financial exigency should be sought only as a last resort after every effort has been made to meet needs in other ways and to find the teacher other employment in the institution. Situations which make drastic retrenchment of this sort necessary should preclude expansions of staff at other points at the same time, except in extraordinary circumstances. Kind of goes back to our thinking about bringing on new courses as you're getting rid of old courses. And as I said, there's a reference in the back that you can check out that will totally give you the whole rundown on the AAUP. So I wanted to talk about, I delved into 3 institutions that have declared exigency at different points in time. And I want to look at those a little more closely. First, we have Southern University that declared financial exigency in 2011. and they're part of a 5-campus university system in Louisiana. In 1880, the Louisiana legislature called for a 12-member board of trustees and for a faculty of arts and letters, competent in every branch of liberal education. For 2 decades, between 1970 and 1990, Southern was the largest HBCU in the nation, serving over 10,000 students. As of fall 22, there were 8,266 students, including graduate students. And Southern University, interestingly enough, is the only HBCU with an engineering program and the first university in Louisiana to offer degrees in philanthropic studies. So why did they declare exigency? They declared exigency in August of 2011 with a unanimous vote of the Board of Supervisors after having months of discussion. State appropriations had dropped by 40% in a 3-year period. The declaration was widely opposed by faculty, staff, and especially alumni. No public university had declared exigency since the University of New Orleans did so after Hurricane Katrina. The university's enrollment had dropped steadily over 5 years prior, draining tuition dollars from the campus, with 1,300 fewer students than they had in 2006. The campus has about 7,300 students, down from 10,000 during the late 90s. And a recent state performance-based funding formula had shifted dollars away from the school. Retention had declined over the previous 5 years. The university asked faculty to take voluntary furloughs to help reduce expenditures. The faculty was convinced that the administration was trying to balance the budget on their backs, and they refused. All staff earning more than $30,000 a year would receive a furlough during the academic year, which would reduce their pay by 10%. The declaration was made in response to these financial issues and was accompanied by a plan. When the institution made the declaration, it was accompanied by a plan to reorganize the university. The State Board of Regents was surprised by the request, and they requested the plan within 90 days of the declaration. That plan included reducing the number of colleges from 9 to 5. So what were their strategies? They employed a number of strategies, as you can see on this slide, including a 10% reduction in salary for all faculty and staff. Faculty was also furloughed for a period of 8 months. AAUP drafted a report that implied that financial exigency could have been avoided had the administration accepted a 60% voluntary furlough rate by faculty. Some faculty and staff positions were eliminated through retirement. The institution instituted mergers of some colleges and schools, as I mentioned, resulting in a reduction from 9 to 5. Class sizes were increased and the number of adjunct and temporary faculty was reduced. Southern also froze vacant positions and non-critical expenditures. So where are they today? The state of Louisiana still subscribes to performance-based budgeting that allocates funds based on measurable results where planning and assessment inform resource allocation. As a result, the university utilizes a planning and assessment department to promote the achievement of institutional goals by fostering continuous improvement in programs, services, and the assessment of student learning. The basis for all their work is their strategic plan, as well as these assessment efforts going on across campus. Enrollment has steadily increased after suffering a slight dip during the pandemic. Net tuition and fee revenue per FTE has steadily increased since the reorganization following the declaration of financial exigency. And they recently had what they called their Founders Day, celebrating 144 years as an institution. So think about that. They declared in 2011, and their reorganization plan has served them well.
Question. So on the strategies after declaration, and want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly with exigency. What items on this list could only be done through exigency versus items that could have been done without exigency? I understand tenured faculty.
Tenured faculty, mergers of colleges and schools and reductions in program. And you will see when we talk later on about what are the alternatives to declaring exigency as far as getting your costs down. Because you can freeze vacant positions, you can freeze non-critical expenditures, but you're going to nip around the edges. In order to really impact the financial results and the budget, you have to go to positions. And AAUP is very, very strict about tenured faculty.
But is that your last statement about nipping around the edges and to really get to a bigger portion of the cost? That's a generality, though, right? Not necessarily
Correct.
standard for every school situation.
Correct. It depends on the institution. So let's look at Lincoln University.
Just really quickly, over here.
I'm sorry.
When we speak of staff, we are speaking of anyone who is not faculty, so non-faculty positions, which include administrative staff and everything else.
Yes. Yes. So let's
Going
take,
along with that from Trustee Young-Ziegler's, non-tenured faculty are considered what?
they're not protected by the AAUP. But I think that most institutions and state institutions as well, if you have faculty on a tenure track and they're getting real close to being tenured, then there can be other complications. So you need to consider, non-tenured faculty, where are they in the process and what's happening? Other questions? Let's move on and look at Lincoln University, who declared exigency in 2020. It's a historically Black land-grant institution in Missouri, founded in 1866 by veterans of the American Civil War. They enroll roughly 1,800 students. They offer undergraduate, graduate, and continuing education programs. In this situation, the faculty is unionized, which places another restriction on declaring exigency. The union contract specifically states that they must have a deficit of such a magnitude that a reduction in faculty is necessary. And it also recognizes, however, that a reduction in student enrollment could require a reduction in academic programs. And what I found interesting about this institution, 98% of their revenue comes from state appropriation and tuition and fees. That's significant. So why did they declare exigency? They issued a public statement indicating they recognize the gravity of their current financial situation after declaring exigency in May of 2020. University administration informed the faculty union that this declaration is a move that could open the door to unusual and extreme actions to help with their survival as a result of the pandemic. As with most other colleges and universities, COVID required a quick shift to how coursework was delivered, most moving to an online format. Student enrollment at Lincoln had been on an average downward trend since 2012, when there were 3,388 students enrolled that fall semester. In 2019, there were 2,436 students enrolled. Summer enrollment was down 42% from 2019, and fall 2020 enrollment was down 25% from the same time in the prior year. The state withheld approximately $1.4 million from LU's budget for the remainder of that current fiscal year as a part of a larger set of spending restrictions enacted on higher education in large part because of the effects of the pandemic. While the university is evaluating all cost-saving measures, the collective bargaining agreement made it necessary to give this notice to the union to be able to fully consider all options. A timeline was created in collaboration with the union. And what did they do after they declared? They terminated 25 faculty members as well as a number of staff positions. Several programs were placed on academic monitoring, while additional programs were closed. Now, the faculty felt like they were left out of these decisions on how to restructure the finances. In this institution, the faculty actually had a vote of no confidence in the president, and the alumni were very upset and they called for dismissal. Where are they today? Since the new strategies were put into place, Lincoln has instituted a program called 25 in 25, meaning they intend to implement 25 new initiatives by the end of the year 2025. The School of Nursing has partnered with several associations to strengthen ties to the nursing community. They broke ground on a new project that will advance healthcare and crisis response education throughout Missouri and the Midwest. They launched a 40,000 square foot facility that will serve as an educational hub dedicated to training essential healthcare and crisis response professionals. Another one of their 25 and 25 is an updated admissions process to expand opportunities for more students. They eliminated test scores and implemented a revised academic scholarship model to provide equitable financial support for students to pursue their educational goals. In addition to current offerings, the Office of Student Health and Wellbeing is developing a strategic plan to launch in fall 2025 that will focus on student support and emphasize enhanced outreach and stronger collaboration to assist students both on and off campus. The enhanced outreach programs, peer health educators, specialized programming for health and well-being, and expanded collaboration to support students through their time at Lincoln. And their enrollment is also up. And I will tell you that my experience with one of the institutions that I reviewed for the Higher Learning Commission, when you declare financial exigency, at least the HLC, and I'm sure the other accreditors do the same thing, they require the teach-out plan because it's all about the students. They want the students to get through their programs and get their degree. They also require that you have transfer agreements with other institutions, meaning that a student can go to another institution and maintain their academic standing, maintain all the program, all the coursework that they've done to date, and they have to make this public. Students get spooked, and that's what happened to the one institution that I reviewed. They lost half of their enrollment from fall of 23 to fall of 24 because the students were just uncertain whether they were going to be able to finish their degree. So keep that in mind. And I want to talk about Henderson State University. Had a conversation with your trustee from Arkansas who said he was right around the corner from Henderson State. Founded in 1890, served as a college for teachers for more than 4 decades and continues to be known as a national leader in teacher education. It's Arkansas's only public liberal arts school and is one of the oldest publicly funded universities in Arkansas. Has an excellent academic record, produced Rhodes, Fulbright, Rotary International Scholars. It serves as Arkansas's only member to the Council of Public Liberal Arts Colleges. Serves about 2,400 students, and they tend to focus on high-demand careers such as aviation. The website touts that every student will get a scholarship. So why did Henderson declare exigency? They faced a projected $12.5 million budget deficit for fiscal year 22. They had increased their debt in excess of 500% since 2001, making the annual servicing of the debt onerous in a budget that was suffering from a lack of cash and had a budget deficit spending for years prior. Fall of 21, enrollment declined by 7.7% over the prior year. Students owed in excess of $10 million in tuition, with 47% of those students no longer attending the university. And as a finance person, I will tell you, when a student leaves an institution and they owe you, good luck getting it. They just will not pay. They received a $6 million advance on their appropriations from the state in 2019 to continue operating. So what have they done since declaring exigency? They cut nearly a third of their staff, including tenured faculty members. They eliminated or reduced programs and provided students with a teach-out plan as required by their accrediting body. The plan was intended to help students complete their degrees. They employed a third-party consultant to evaluate their academic portfolio. They wanted to improve campus governance through the initiation, and this is interesting, of a rapid response team charged with working closely across university divisions and departments to comb through expenditures and look for efficiencies and cost savings. They implemented a strategic resource allocation model as well as an academic performance and program viability model. And I make reference to websites where you can read about those two items at the end of the presentation. They had a significant level of faculty involvement in decision-making, consulting with the faculty senate as to which programs and personnel should be impacted. However, they didn't let any grass grow under their feet as they moved quickly, touted as the largest cost containments in the shortest time frame in higher education. And I also make reference in the last few slides to a book that I would highly recommend that you read. There's actually two, but one I would highly recommend. But their goals were to restore financial and operational integrity, improve student success rates, and redefine their academic mission and refocus resources to selected academic programs. Today, their enrollment of first-time freshmen and transfers increased significantly for fall of 24 as the campus continues to strengthen its recruiting and partnership efforts. They reported a 23% jump in first-time freshmen as of their census date, which is 11 days into their semester, for fall 2024. Transfer enrollment increased by 19%, and they attribute that increase to a more personalized style of recruiting, including building stronger relationships with state and regional high schools. And in addition, the number of students living on campus increased 6.5%, which will impact revenue from room and board. I like what I read about Henderson. I actually spent a lot of time. This institution is, in my mind, is one of the stellar examples. And I was talking with you about, if you're right around the corner, talk to them. So let's consider what happens prior to declaring exigency. It is a serious matter and it shouldn't be considered lightly. However, it needs to be considered when an institution has exhausted all other means that have a meaningful impact on finances. Waiting too long can exacerbate the depth of the financial issues and make the process much more difficult. The university should conduct a comprehensive, detailed review of the financial situation that would lead to a declaration. In addition to looking at revenue, expenses, and cash flow, a thorough review of admissions policies, including recruitment activity, examining strategies used when enrollment was growing. Relationships with local and regional high schools can be examined as a way to impact recruitment. Keep in mind that the discounting has been deployed. Keep in mind the discounting that has been deployed and how a more targeted approach might be beneficial for the future. Most institutions have a financial exigency policy, and TSU is no exception. Your policy clearly outlines what's necessary to move forward with the declaration, from the involvement of campus constituents, especially faculty, which very closely mirrors the AAUP guidelines, to looking at other alternatives based on financial data that need to be reviewed and communicated. Documentation prior to declaring exigency should be thorough and discuss all options that were considered to find new revenue sources as well. As I mentioned, in the past, institutions tried to grow their way out of it, sort of a build it and they will come scenario. Competition has grown so fierce for students based on the demographic cliff that past strategies may not be as effective as they once were. Consider options such as philanthropic support for institutional financial aid. Restricted gifts can support these scholarships into the future. In other words, you want a donor to say, I want to restrict my dollars to this scholarship for whatever purpose. And you can use those into the future. They're not a one-time thing. Another option, which I've seen at both small colleges and universities, is I know you have an outsourced bookstore. I think it's Follett. Is that correct? I did some, it's Follett. You can bring an outsourced bookstore in-house and create a spirit shop and just sell merchandise and outsource the textbooks to a third party, because the margin on merchandise is much, much higher than it is on that of textbooks. What about leasing out unused facilities and offering campus facilities for summer activities? That can be an additional source of revenue. Selling property is an option, but it's a one-time influx of revenue. Are there other cost-saving measures that can be employed? Nipping around the edges, as I mentioned earlier, can include freezing hiring, freezing expenditures. Larger buys involve early retirement incentives to faculty and staff, but be sure you understand the long-term ramifications of payouts that could cause savings to be delayed, which is what we talked about earlier. Reducing salaries is not popular, but it might be an alternative to reducing the workforce. And evaluate sports programs for potential reductions. I've seen institutions actually change athletic conferences to cut back on travel. Make use of any reserves. However, generally, by the time a university gets to considering exigency, reserves and fund balances have been exhausted. Conduct an academic program review. Critical and even more critical is involving faculty at all levels, including deans, administrative faculty, and faculty at the program level. The registrar's office is a great source of data. They should have data down to the course level and identify courses that are chronically undersubscribed, which can lead to offering fewer sections or combining sections to increase net revenue generated by a course. Investigate the efficiency of using adjunct or temporary faculty when not absolutely necessary. Take a serious look at student to faculty ratio, but consider the implications of changing the ratio. Hopefully improve productivity. As a part of the review, consider the impact on students. And everything that I read said, when you make a decision to declare exigency, your students have to come first. You need to make decisions based on the impact on students. I've seen institutions reduce programming, and they're unable at that point then to meet their general education requirements. That needs to be a consideration. A significant impact on managing student outcomes and making sure a student completes a degree are paramount. Just like I said, it's all about students. That's why we're here. Then there's going to be a culture of resistance. The environment in higher ed in general leads to an appropriate questioning of all decisions by those who enjoy a level of independence and autonomy that you don't see in private industry. Increasing exposure to social media can be a backdrop for a negative campaign by faculty, staff, and students. Resistance can be conveyed in many forms, including uncoordinated attacks to well-organized protests that garner media attention, and even legal challenges. How an institution responds is critical. Certain forms of protesting should be respected by the university as well as protected. Resistance can be mitigated with a combination of determination and appropriate forms of accurate data. And accrediting bodies, we've talked about this a little to this point. They will become much more involved if you would declare financial exigency. Teach out plans, transfer agreements, being able to maintain your finances, being able to provide a plan to the accrediting agency. This is what we're going to do. This is our timeline. This is how we're going to get there. They often require, lots of interim reports, visits. It can be quite intense, and it takes a lot of time, trust me, for institutions to do these reports.
Can I ask a question about the accrediting bodies? Do you know, for the examples that you gave us or any of the other institutions, like at what point in time did they engage the accrediting bodies? Like, did they say, hey, we think this is what we're going to need to do 6 months from now? Or did they say, this is where we are and we need help to get through that? Like, what was that process like?
I would highly recommend, and like I said, I've been with HLC for 17 years doing these visits. Don't put it off. Let them know, because if you don't, they're going to come back later and say, why did you not tell us? And believe it or not, accrediting agencies are not there to be confrontational. I mean, they are there to try to help the institution survive. And as I mentioned, that's a lot, in large part, why the feds are stepping in saying, well, you reaccredited this institution and 6 months later they closed. What happened? So there's a lot of pressure on them. I wouldn't wait.
Thank you.
On that note, with the accrediting body, this is not just, we're not just talking about the accrediting body for the institution itself. We're also talking about the accrediting bodies for individual units like business, engineering,
Yes.
chemistry, those types of things. So it goes deeper
Yes.
than just the accrediting body for the institution.
It does. Like I said, they, like us, don't like surprises. So it does. Other questions before we move on? So I think from all the data and all the research that I've examined and tried to present to you today, probably the number one item that is the most important is campus communication. And I've seen institutions do open forums, open to all campus constituents. They can be very useful. Direct communication from the president, the provost, and the CFO is also very, very favorable. I've seen institutions, and you will see when you look at some of the research, that they actually post updates on their processes on their website. They will have a financial exigency committee, an ad hoc committee, and they will have a timeline. They will have a charge from the president. They will have a timeline, and they will do updates. This is what we did this week, or this is what we did this month, or this is how we're progressing. And you can also use social media for that. But educating the campus community has proven to elicit consensus. Successful institutions, as I mentioned, have established an ad hoc financial exigency committee, and their job is to assist with examining data, becoming intimate with the situation at hand, and they can be instrumental in getting the word out to their peers. Another notion, as evidenced by the success of Henderson State, is soliciting ideas and input from all areas of the community. It can be really surprising where some of the best ideas come from. And you think, well, the custodians are custodians, or the facilities people are just facility people. They're on the front line every day. They can have ingenious ideas for cost reduction and efficiency. And data, as I mentioned, can come from many areas of the university, in addition to finance, enrollment management, the registrar's office. They can give you examination of enrollment trends, current and projected. The registrar can provide data to the course level for programs. I'm assuming that you have an information system here that it's electronic registration. I like to look sometimes at iPads, the integrated post-secondary education data system. Every institution is required to do an annual report to iPads. And with that data, you can actually compare your institution to your peers and competitors, which can be very helpful. Now, I will caution, the data typically is about 2 years old, so sometimes it's not so helpful. And the Office of Institutional Research can design reports where you can pull real-time data. And I noticed I did stroll around a little bit on your Office of Institutional Research, and it looks like they have some data there that might be valuable. So what
I have
have
a question. I have a question about the ad hoc committee. Did you look at the makeup of the committees for these various institutions? Who were the stakeholders? Who did they have? Some examples of who were on those committees.
Typically, an ad hoc committee, well, it'll be very heavy in faculty, particularly faculty administration. And then there will be layers of other committees below that, because you'll have a committee that's going to look at the administrative side of the house. And you might have a committee, for example, that looks at enrollment data. And then you'll have the faculty involved at the program level, because they have a lot of data at their program level of what's going on. So it's kind of a multi-layered type of thing. It depends on the institution. But as I said, the more involvement that you can have, the higher the chance of having consensus. Because people want to know. They don't want to be kept in the dark. They want to know what's going on with the institution. And that's not a bad thing. Like I shared governance is shared responsibility. Hold people accountable. Other questions?
Mine is more on like the timeline for the 3 examples that you gave us. What was the timeline that it took them to actually file or declare exigency? Like I know I saw where Henderson had the fastest. So what does the fastest look like? What's that time period?
The timeline is going to vary by institution. What I would suggest the trustees do, and anyone else that you want to involve in the process, is get your policy out. There's a board policy that's very prescriptive. This is what we need to do before we declare exigency. And then you can figure out, where do I get the data? How do I get the data? How credible is the data? Where do I distribute it? And it's all university, it would be university specific, because a smaller university is going to be able to move much more quickly than a university with 25,000 students. And that timeline, I think, once you understand your policy and where you're going and where you get your data, then I think you can set up a reasonable timeline to address that.
Thank you.
You also mentioned with Henderson State, I believe, that they employed a consultant to help.
They did.
Were any of the other examples that you referenced, did they use consultants? And what have you seen with use of consultants through the process?
I have not seen the use of consultants for exigency. Obviously there's a lot of consultants for enrollment management and that sort of thing. But I did do some research, and there's a slide in the back where there's a list of potential third parties that you might want to involve. And they're related directly to the process of exigency.
And were those consultants used because the process is so tenuous that it would take too much university staff and faculty time, or was it just to have someone with a targeted approach to the exigency process?
I think that with the use of a consultant, you get someone that's all they do. That's all they do. That's their focus, or they have a unit within their business, and that's their focus. And it should actually, it's going to cost you on one hand, but I think on the other hand, it's actually going to cut down a little bit on the university personnel's time.
Can you go through and talk the responsibility? So what's the responsibility of the administration, the president and staff, and what's the responsibility of the board in actually developing the exigency plan?
Well, and I think I might have mentioned this, or maybe I didn't. I've been on both sides of the board table. I've served on boards for a number of nonprofit organizations. I have always believed, of course, my last 20 years or so have been in small privates, that the board should be eyes in and hands out. But the board should also be informed, and they should be informed accurately, honestly. Some board members don't like to get too much into the weeds, because that's what you hire the administration to do. However, I think when you're looking at declaring financial exigency, the president and the board need to have a critical relationship, because the board needs to be informed, and not just through full board meetings. maybe the president sends an update on where you are once a week. Or it depends. A lot of this is institution specific. What is the climate like of the institution? How much does the board want to be involved? But I don't think the board wants to design the process or anything like that. I could be wrong. But you have other things to do.
Quick question, and thank you so much for the information you've shared thus far. Based off of your experience and what you've done the research on, what has the relationship been with the state following declaring exigency when it comes to appropriations, and what was there any type of, and I'm using air quotes, fallout for a university that you're aware of?
Not that my research shows me. Matter of fact, some states have actually been anxious to kind of step up and say, how do we help you in the short run? Because I think, again, when you declare financial exigency, it shows a commitment on the part of the leadership, all the way from the board down, that we want to make this institution succeed. And most states appreciate that based on what I've seen. Now, it could be a little more contentious depending on what the state budget looks like the California budget. But that's what I've seen. They don't want universities to go out of business. So I have a couple more slides here. As I mentioned, and I probably said this before, but making the declaration is time consuming, it's data demanding, but there's a number of benefits. One of the benefits is avoiding closure in what I like to call the 3 R's: reimagining, refocusing, and reinventing the institution. The seriousness of declaring exigency can be a beacon for refining the mission and reinvestment of scarce resources to improve finances for the future. Declaring exigency can also signal a deep commitment by leadership, as we just talked about, while restoring confidence in the university leadership as a whole. And then I was asked to talk about the potential outcomes of not declaring. And I think earlier in my presentation, I talked about the situation getting so deep, if you delay the decision, that there's no way out other than closure. I think that needs to be considered. When you have serious financial trouble and you choose not to declare exigency, it also causes you to resort to less drastic cost-cutting measures, or more drastic cost-cutting measures like programs, hiring freezes, reducing salaries, increasing tuition, elimination of what you consider non-essential services. And I will go back to what I said before, that we are here for the students. It needs to be all about the students. And I've seen institutions that have said, well, we don't need student advising, or we can get by with graduate tutors. We don't need faculty to be involved in that. But it's all about students, and I think that needs to be considered. You have fewer options to significantly restructure, again, going back to the AAUP and the cost of tenured faculty. There's increased pressure on other areas, which we just talked about, and there could be reputational damage. I had one institution, no, I didn't have, but I saw one institution that actually carried, and I'll get this number wrong, but it's somewhere in this neighborhood, about $150 million of accounts payable into another fiscal year because they couldn't afford to pay them in the prior year. And that can cause reputational damage, that can cause lawsuits. It's not a good thing. And that brings me to the legal complexities. Faculty contracts and state laws, even with the financial exigency declaration, there may be legal challenges if you attempt to significantly reduce faculty positions without following your policy.
One comment. When back on your slide for the benefits of financial exigency, some of these points, and the reimagine, revision, reinvent, a lot of these things can be done and should be done before or you declare financial exigency. So I know the idea of waiting too late, but in the time that you're waiting to do this, these are some of the things that should be put in place actually before you actually file for financial exigency, right?
And as a
Can
matter
you speak on that?
As a matter of fact, the AAUP policy requires that you've exhausted just about every means that you could think of before you declare exigency. And then I wanted to point out, Colleges on the Brink, The Case for Financial Exigency is a must read, is absolutely a must read. It was written by a former college president who went through this process, and it talks about, what do you do beforehand? How do you declare it? Why do you declare it? Who do you need to tell? And it gives you some case examples. It's just totally a must read. And then Satasha Green wrote a paper, and I don't know if it was a PhD paper or a thesis or what it was, Declaring Financial Exigency in Higher Education, How Do You Recover? That's another must read. On the next page, there's the two items that I referred to from Henderson State. There's a discussion of their academic performance and program viability model. There's a discussion of their strategic resource allocation model. I think those are also well worth looking at. And then finally, should you declare exigency, here's some references for implementation. And there's the AAUP guideline, which is critical to be familiar with. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot of data here. You've asked some really good questions. Are there other questions I can answer today?
Yes, ma'am. I have a quick question. When I think about bankruptcy, there are certain protections that an individual will have, but there are also certain things that said individual also cannot do. There are some restrictions. So when it comes to the exigency, is there any type of rights that the university is giving up because they have declared such a state?
Not that I've seen. Not in my research that I've seen. I mean, I realize basically the researchers compare this to a bankruptcy because of the two items that I mentioned, the ability to reorganize your product and the ability to right-size your workforce. But there can be legal implications, but I haven't seen any research that would indicate that you lose anything. Does that help?
Let me go a little bit deeper. So when I say lose anything, that's like the governing body, the board.
Right.
Are there any types of restrictions that where there may be other involvement from the state because we've declared such a state?
That's a really good question. And again, it could be dependent on the state. It could be dependent on the history that the university has had with the state. It could be dependent on, does the state have enough money to go around? It could be, it's probably going to be institution specific and state specific. What kind of relationship have we had? But as I said, states aren't in the business of wanting universities to go out of business.
Well, on that last point, and maybe looking at Southern or some of the other universities as examples, did you do any research, or did your research tell you what those states did as these institutions were going through exigency? Since, based on your last comment, you said states they don't want to see a university go out of business.
Well, I think specifically in Henderson's example, they want a timeline. They want to know what is going to be your process for improvement. What do you anticipate that improvement is going to look like, which goes back to reimagining, revisioning, and refocusing. And they want a timeline.
And that, at least the way I'm interpreting what you're saying, that would be one of those things on the exhaustive list that a university would do before it goes into exigency, putting together a timeline,
Yes,
working with the state to understand, is there some way before
I would
declaring
think,
exigency?
I would think that would be the smart way to do it, absolutely. Because they don't want any surprises, just like the accrediting bodies don't want any surprises. And also, if after you read some of this, and like I said, Colleges on the Brink is a must read. It's an excellent, excellent resource. If you have further questions, please feel free to let Victoria know, and she can funnel additional questions to me if they come up in the course of looking at the material.
Just one final question, I think. Once the declaration is made and you have that timeline, it's not financial exigency forever. So what is the point of return and what does it look like? What does the process look like for a university to say we are no longer in exigency?
Well, I think some of the items that I covered earlier, you know, your enrollment's going up, your student success outcomes, your retention, your graduation rates are going up, your revenue is getting better. I mean, I think you will know when you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief when things start to improve.
As a follow-up to her question, who clicks the button to say that exigency is over?
You know, that's a really interesting question because I have not run across that in my research. Even when I looked at Southern from 2011, there was no firm date that they said, okay, we're okay now. So that's a really good question.
And I have a question, just thinking about exigency. Would a university ever enter exigency just to do it as a healthy process to figure out their financial situation? Or is it definitely you do exigency because you know there's a financial situation that can only be cured through doing that process?
Yeah, you would declare exigency when, as I mentioned early on in the presentation, there's an imminent crisis going on. And one of the main reasons why institutions declare exigency is the AAUP guidelines for tenured faculty. Because if you start to eliminate programs and you have tenured faculty in those programs, if you're not, it's just going to be more difficult. It's easier to do some of the restructuring that needs to be done if you declare exigency.
And maybe my comment stated another way would be, once an institution, or through your research, have you seen institutions enter exigency and then not follow through in doing anything that exigency allows them to do?
Not in my research. Can I say it doesn't happen? It probably does. And I think that's why the AAUP alludes to, you know, being just because. You don't declare exigency just because you want to do the things that you could do without making the declaration. And like I said, if additional questions come up, please feel free to funnel them through Victoria and we'll get back to you.
Anyone have anything else?
You look a little worn out.
No, it's a lot to take in. I mean, but that's the reason why we're here, just so that we can all level set as to what it means and the difficulty of the decisions that we have ahead of us. So I wanted to get a baseline on that, but thank you.
And I forgot on the last slide, you had asked about consultants. These are four of what I would consider the best based on my research. Huron is outstanding. I know them, and Forbes Mazars, is an offshoot of the big accounting firm. Edular focuses more on students. How do you keep your students engaged? What do you do with your students? And like I said, that's why we're here. We're here because of our students. So that might help you a bit too.
Well, before you go and you mentioned students, I was expecting. Oh, Tyler, go ahead.
Oh, his light's red.
His light was
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for speaking with us. I guess the only question I have today is, what is kind of the messaging model you're giving to the student body, especially, or to alumni who kind of put their heart and soul, at least into our institution. Because this is a lot to take in, I would assume, as a board. I'm sure everyone's like, this is a lot. I know it's a lot for myself. But how do we kind of give this information to students as a public institution that has to have public board meetings and things of that nature? And how do we kind of share with them, hey, this doesn't mean you have to run away and transfer to another school or whatever the case is, but we're kind of on difficult times, but this is how we're going to get there. Like, are there any institutions that kind of have success in that communication model? Is that making any sense?
Well, it does make sense. And unfortunately, I know one that went the other direction, like I said, and spooked their students and lost half of their enrollment from spring semester to fall semester. Mm-hmm. I think that communication sometimes can be difficult because it needs to be open and honest. Some institutions keep their finances like this. Right. And then when they get into trouble, it's like, well, why didn't you tell us this before? So I think it's frequent communication. And you're right, the accrediting bodies require you to put transfer institutions out there. And that's what happened to the one that I visited. The students just started, well, they're not going to be open. I'm not going to be able to get my degree here, so I'm going to go somewhere else, which is unfortunate. And I think that student government, I'm not sure what kind of student government that you have at TSU.
We have them standing, we have them in here today, our president and vice president. If y'all can wave or something.
Good.
Krishonda Oquin and Anaya Sanders, they're here listening, so thank y'all for coming. But go ahead.
That's an excellent way to get communication out to students as peers. And the president or the ad hoc exigency committee can go to student government meetings, or that's an excellent way to get information out from your peers because it's more believable. I'm hearing it from my roommate or whatever.
And I guess a follow-up to that is, how does financial exigency, I guess, impact scholarships? I don't really know if you touched on that. But I guess a lot of students, at least here at TSU, they're more so worried about like, oh, is this going to impact, my current scholarship? Or incoming students, I think, are a lot more worried too. Like, oh, well, can I get, a half ride here, a full ride, full tuition, whatever the case is? Like, is there any data on kind of like a decrease in funding for scholarships as a result of this? I would assume the answer is yes, but I was just curious.
Well, that goes back to looking at the data.
Okay.
And what kind, what are our commitments with regard to financial aid? And are we going to be able to maintain those? Is the state supporting us like they should be for student financial aid? There's philanthropic support. Your alumni base, from what I understand, is very strong. And they can give restricted gifts for scholarships that will fund in perpetuity. Mm. So it's kind of difficult to give you a straight answer, but.
Well, I would venture to think, to your point, that if there is philanthropy that's going to the foundation, and the foundation is not in the exigency, it's the institution.
Correct.
My question was a follow-on to Tyler's. Earlier, you mentioned in the process that students could be engaged where appropriate. Where have you seen and how have you seen students involved in that process, aside from just the communication piece with reaching out to the SGA? Have you ever seen any students or student organizations or student leaders an active part of any of these ad hoc committees?
That could be part of when I talked about the layers under your ad hoc exigency committee. You definitely want to get student involvement there. And usually from my research is it starts with student government. And they bring other students in. I mean, obviously you don't want 5,000 students to sit there and try to tell you how to run the institution, but you can involve them as you see fit, as you see appropriate. You can share data with students as you see appropriate. It could be institution specific. Every university is different.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Do you want me out now? Is that my cue?
No, you can sit there. It's fine. We've only got one other item on the agenda. So for our next item, we are going to look at the revised TSU Board of Trustees calendar and the meeting schedule. As I mentioned earlier, this is item number 5 on the agenda for today. As I mentioned earlier, these are the dates that we have currently scheduled. We did not discuss them during our November meeting, so I wanted to open it up for any discussion that anyone wants to have in regards to the dates.
Hello, Madam Chair. So good to see you. A couple of things, particularly after having this discussion, that has really been weighing on me around our meetings. What I am proposing to the board is for us to have the opportunity to really look at how do we go deeper in strategy as we look to continue to move the institution forward. And with that, one of the suggestions that I would like to put before you is removing the Thursday before the Friday board meeting and taking those committees, allowing those chairs to establish individual meetings throughout the month versus the marathon of going through a lot of information to go into Friday's meeting for decision making. So the thought process would be, for example, if the education committee wants to have an opportunity to go deeper for an hour or 2 hours with the administration around something that is specific to education, that allows them to, take the notes that they need, have the questions that they need in that individual meeting. Also giving that committee a few weeks to deliberate and think about what is the best path forward in preparation for a meeting at the end of the month. So ultimately, that is a suggestion I'd like to put before the board, taking those Thursdays prior and allowing each committee chair to distribute their meetings throughout the month to work one-on-one with those individual departments to go deeper in preparation for a meeting later.
I have a simple question or clarification. When you're saying this Thursday and Friday, does the full board meeting have to be on a Friday? We're going through dates here. So are you just saying have committee meetings throughout the quarter, but then have one day for a board meeting, whether it's a Thursday, Friday?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It doesn't, whatever date works for the board. Really what I'm thinking about is the strategy around the meetings, and we can talk about the dates, but what my ask is for us to think again a little bit deeper around that Thursday prior. So instead of 2 days back to back, taking the committees and spreading them out throughout the month to go deeper as we really think about a lot of the things that we have before us for the institution. And each committee chair would determine when they wanted their meeting to be, in partnership, of course, with President Tucker around what makes the most sense for the administration. And it also doesn't mean that the entire administration have to sit through waiting on their committee to report or their department to report.
Maybe a question for Secretary Brown and advising us on what, if any, requirements there are for the actual board meeting versus the committee meetings. And then for the committee meetings, what type of notice would need to be given to have those committee meetings. And I'm asking the question to understand if we separate the committee meetings away from Thursday, would that create any issue? And do we have to have a set schedule for committee meetings, or can we simply just do it based on that chair's notice upon 5 days prior notice or whatever the notice period may be?
Yeah, that's a great question. We can separate the committee meetings from the board meetings. In the past, we've done all the meetings on one day, which is a marathon meeting in and of itself. We need to give 5 days notice if we're going to have a committee meeting. So, if one committee decides to meet on every other Tuesday and another one decides another date, that's fine. Or if they want to, set a meeting according to whatever their schedules are for that particular quarter, for example, then they can do that as well. We just need 5 days notice for those committee meetings.
I think one thing to consider if we do that, some of us serve on multiple committees. So then, those would still be in person, correct?
Well, I think we can take more advantage of electronic means, that if we have our traditional board meeting in person on the campus, to take those committee meetings and move them virtually.
And I would add that is what a lot of other institutions do. And they have their meetings separately and do some of the working group sessions at different times.
I can support that. I just also want to say that it may not be something that we have to do forever, but given the situation and the state that we're in right now, there's a lot that we have to do. There's a lot of learning that we have to uncover. We inherited a lot of things, and we inherited a lot of things that we really didn't even know. And so with these more frequent committee meetings, I think we always have been able to have committee meetings. But if I'm understanding what you're saying, then perhaps is that we may need to be a little bit more intentional and really digging a little bit deeper and being prepared for the full board meeting. So when we actually come, they're more productive and we're able to move forward.
Absolutely. And this is definitely with the administration in mind, President Tucker, that it's really intentional for us to think around as the board, we're here as your strategic partner. And a lot of times what I see is we have some very intelligent administration that has to, in a lot of ways, just report the weather. And what I would like to see is an opportunity for those committees to actually work shoulder to shoulder with them in committee meetings to go deeper in the questions. So when we come together as a governing body for the meeting, which I'm proposing to be an end of the month, that we've had all month to talk with you, talk with your team through those committees so that we can really go forth in the best decision making. And to Dr. Quall's point, this does not have to be forever, trustees. We have a ton of weight on our shoulders to uphold the university and continue to strengthen and in partnership with the administration.
I'll just go on the record to say I do support that recommendation or that action we may take. I do believe that it's going to take us a great amount of work and conversations and figuring things out if we want to move forward in advance. And so for the opportunity to have a discussion and conversation and to elaborate on the work that's being done in each individual committee, I do believe that separate meetings will be necessary to move forward.
I'm trying to feel my way back through the process since I'm not voting anymore and commenting. I'm very supportive of separating the committee meetings from the regular board meeting because that's the best practice. Most of the work should be done in the committee meeting before we come to the board meeting. So whatever calendar that's approved in terms of cadence, then I would say finance, audit committee have the same cadence around the board meetings that's going to be approved. The only concern that I would have around it is to ensure that as we work through scheduling the committee meetings, that some of the same resources may be required in different committee meetings, that we do that around a time frame that's also convenient with management. But the concept makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm very supportive of that because that's where the real work should be done, in the committee meeting. I also think that the relative executive for the university should be the point of contact to coordinate and determine that agenda with the committee chairs. So in the audit, that could be Jim that participates in that and works out the schedule, and we work together around the timing.
Absolutely. So what, to put a bow on it, Madam Chair, what I would like for us to vote for today is to separate the meeting and set a schedule to determine what is that one board meeting, the big board meeting, and then allow everyone to work in partnership with our secretary to determine what the committee schedule will be, and working with President Tucker.
You have one other thing in there in regards to the last day in the month. It doesn't really matter which week. I just, in looking at my schedule alone, June, September, November is obviously Thanksgiving, so that's not an option. But for the June and September dates, I know I can't do those. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what days are you proposing for the new schedule? Because we'd have to make sure that we have that set for those dates for the one meeting, and then two for the committee chairs, because there's a couple of them in here that they're the ones who ultimately have to make the decision as to what works best for their schedules to align that. So, and that's a question that I just don't know if we actually know that right now.
Right. And so what I would ask is if we deliberate here on what is the best date for the cadence for that meeting. So to your point, you can't do the last week for 3 of the month. So let's talk about what that date is. Because we have some months that, according to the current schedule, is the second week, and then it jumps to the third week. So there is not a true flow. So it's really just looking at what makes sense for the body and the administration on what should be the actual big meeting. And then again, going back for the committees to decide when do they want to meet, and presenting that schedule back to President Tucker and our board secretary.
I'm looking at kind of to your point about the dates. So if you look at the date from, June, the third week would run into Juneteenth. And then November, we would be running into Thanksgiving. So I guess I kind of would propose maybe we keep these Fridays, just keep these Fridays, and then schedule the committees around this kind of set schedule already.
So keep the March 14th, June 13th, September 19th, November 21st.
Yes, I think, yeah.
My concern was never with the board date on Friday. Mine is really with the structure of the Thursday prior.
Okay, so then I guess, then can we keep the Friday schedule that we have?
If that's up to the consensus of the board. Mine, again, is removing March 13th, June 12th, September 18th, November 20th, and redistributing that throughout the month to go deeper in committees.
So can I just clarify? Hi, everyone. This is Trustee Donita Smith-Knight.
Hey there, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Are we saying that those committee meetings that we currently hold on Thursday, all board members are currently present? So are we saying that the individual committees will have their own meetings and all board members need to be present at all of those meetings?
All board members are able to go today to any meeting that they want to. The reason why we all sit in the same meeting is because we're all here together on Thursday and Friday.
No, I think it was designed that way so that we could actually have this discussion since we were all in the room together. And if we had to be on Friday for the board meeting, so we can actually go through the substance on that Thursday. So the Thursday meeting started with us. That wasn't really the schedule before we got on the board. We added the Thursday schedule so that each board member could participate, logistically, that we were all here.
Yeah, I don't think though still that we ever really talked it through, but that's really not here, neither here nor there. I think it's that once we've got to the point where we are today, it's really does this current structure work for the work that we need to do for the path forward? Is the Thursday meeting effective, or is it more effective to break it out throughout the month to go deeper with the committees? So Trustee Smith Knight, I get it, but we got a lot of big work. So I think it's really according to what each committee chair's schedule would allow, and for those board members to make those additional commitments to attend those other meetings. And to Dr. Quall's point, this is not a forever. Again, we just finished having a complete session around financial exigency. This is just for the importance of the matter at hand.
Okay, I just want to make sure one more thing. So because of, I guess, just simple logistics, that Thursday meeting allows us to have all the staff present and all the board members can hear. And I know if we change that, it will be optional. So if I were able to make a suggestion, it would be to have that Thursday meeting the week before the board meeting, virtually, so that we do have ample time to go deeper with the information. Just thinking about the logistics of this all. And I agree, the timing of the Thursday meeting doesn't give us a lot of time to go deep, but I also think that being able to compile all of those meetings at one time so that all board members have access to the details is key. So that would be one thought that I would have, is to move that Thursday meeting a week prior and virtual.
But just to confirm, if I'm thinking about this correctly, we don't have to make that determination today, right? The committee chairs can make that election as that month approaches. And I would be comfortable, and I'm suggesting what I think was floated earlier by Trustee Smith, that we keep the schedule of the Fridays to have the board meetings, which would be March 14th, June 13th, September 19th, November 21st. And then each chair would work with Secretary Brown, Interim President Tucker on scheduling those committee meetings. And they could schedule those committee meetings the Thursday before those Friday board meetings.
Or any day.
Or any day.
Basically we're talking about committee meetings, which can be any day of the week, as long as there's a 5-day notice before you have your committee meeting. It could be Sunday if you want it to be on Sunday. All you need is a 5-day notice. The only thing that we're talking about is when would that be? And those committee meetings will be held as long as there is a 5-day notice before the meeting is held. And it's open to the entire board, but those committee persons would be expected to be there, but those meetings are open to the entire board. Then these Friday meetings will be reserved for the full board meeting, where those committees will come in and make their report, just like we normally do. But those committee meetings would not be a quote unquote Thursday meeting. It would be just a meeting of the committee any day of the week.
Yes, that's the proposal. And I totally get from a logistics and an efficiency standpoint, Trustee Smith Knight, what my proposal is really not so much around the efficiency, but the effectiveness of a committee meeting. And allowing, not to have a marathon on any day, but allowing each committee to have their meeting for their allotted time to go deeper with those departments.
And I think the only requirement is the notice, and that it's recorded, publicly recorded for the meetings.
So are we going to as we set these committee meetings, is the intent for us to say on the third Tuesday in March, X committee is going to meet and that's the cadence, or is it going to be just kind of, we pick a day that's most convenient?
My suggestion is that the committee chairs determine what's best for their schedule in conjunction with who sits on their committee and with President Tucker and staff.
And I'm good with that strategy, as long as it doesn't, and it's just a nuance. If we just go with the Friday dates that are identified and eliminate and move the Thursday dates to individual committee meetings, that we don't end up with a situation where the audit committee, for illustration, is meeting on Monday, the finance committee is meeting on Tuesday, and then the other committees are meeting on Thursday, and then we end up with more days that allows management the ability to not focus on some other things. But I think we can work through that.
Right.
And the concept, I would think earlier, some of those committee meetings may be 3 hours, some of them may be 5 hours, depending on the agenda. I'm okay with that, as long as it's not creating a situation where now we are forever back to back in meetings instead of getting a few things done. But that's just an issue of timing and working together, so no problem here.
And then to think about what Trustee Smith Knight is saying, what if there is also a conjunction that if audit and finance work hand in hand, maybe those committees could be together. My whole point is, in order for effectiveness of where we are today, is for everything not to be in one day as a marathon.
I guess the only other thing I think about is staff, and I mean that'll be for you to, but just having people, I think some predictability helps in this, right? So that we know when we are to be here or be available, because I think all of us are very busy individuals, and my calendar can get full months in advance. And if we decide, 2 weeks ahead of time that we're going to meet, I may not have that date available. So like, would we create kind of a regular schedule?
Right.
So it won't just, okay.
Right. It's each committee chair can take back what's the date, what's the time, what makes sense for administration, and you can set up the cadence. It's just not the day before in a marathon.
Works for me.
I honestly like that idea. Even though I have meetings throughout the week just for other things, I do like that idea solely because being in here for say 4 or 5 hours on a Thursday and then coming back Friday, it seems as though some things have to get rushed because it's in the essence of time. We're tired, truthfully, we're human. So I think honestly that's not a bad idea to consider kind of breaking it up based on those committees' surrounding schedules and making sure that those who need to be there are there, and then obviously it's optional for the rest of the trustees. And it's asked that you can come, but not a requirement. I don't think that's a bad thing. So I think that works, at least for me, and that still gives me enough time to be able to say, hey, can't make it to this meeting, I gotta be on the board meeting to listen to this. I don't think that's a problem for me as a student, but I can see how it could be a cause of concern. But I think with time management and things like that, that's something that could be figured out. So I'm on board with that. So yeah.
And we do love seeing you on a regular basis at Tennessee State, but there is a cost associated with this process back to back. So some of those committee meetings, I think, can be done in existing conference rooms, and we can cut back on the extra lunches and a few other things.
And they can all be 100% virtual too, President Tucker.
Yep.
I think we still are missing that. This isn't going to be forever. This is only because we have a lot of work that has to be done. We just went through a discussion on exigency, and so a lot of the financial and the academic programs, to say the least. I'm not on the academic committee, but there's a lot of work that has to be done to get to the point where we are. And look at our past board meetings. The finance committee has always gone over. And to what Tyler just said, you know, in the essence of time, if we separate the committee meetings, it would seem as though we wouldn't have as much to say in the essence of time. We really would be able to have discussions, dig deep on questions, make sure we understand, and then come back to the board meeting. I think the other thing that we may just be missing and not really thinking about, the committee meetings, only the committee members vote for recommendations to the full board. Anything that we bring to the full board requires approval. There's still an opportunity when you bring it to the full board with a recommendation to have discussion. So if you were not able to attend a meeting, there's still an opportunity to participate and have discussion before the full board approves. Is that correct, Secretary Brown?
That is correct, and I wanted to just piggyback off of what Trustee Young-Sigler said, that these committee meetings would be recorded regardless. So if someone cannot attend and wants to get up to speed, they can put that on and listen to it on their commute home. So that's another added benefit.
You need a motion.
It's a long sentence. Well, actually, this is quite simple. I just move that we continue with the full board meetings for March 14th, June 13th, September 19th, and November 21st, removing March 13th, 12th, 18th, and 20th for the committee, for all committee chairs to determine what that schedule should be and bring that schedule back, because we don't have to figure that out today. That is an ugly motion, but there it is.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion?
I want to clarify something. You said the chairs determine that and bring it back. So are you wanting further board approval, or is it just brought to the president and leave it there?
Right.
Okay.
And there you go.
Okay.
We ready to take our vote? Great. Trustee Chapman?
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet?
Yes.
Trustee Qualls?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Chair Winton? Trustee Young-Sigler?
Yes.
And Trustee Smith-Knight?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. Well, just want to say thank you for everybody coming today. We are very fortunate in the fact that we do have our bodies within the state of Tennessee who have been exceptionally helpful to us. So want to say hi to everybody at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission who have helped us to ensure that we are educated on the things that we need to be educated about, and that we try to, as best as we can, to be ahead of the curve in terms of what the difficult challenges that we're facing. So it's good to know that we're not facing them alone, and thank you all for the time today.
One last comment. June 15th is the president's birthday, so when you show up for the meeting, please bring something.
Yes. Cupcakes.
Okay.
They just got to be $2.99 cupcakes, President Tucker, because we watching the budget.
You gotta do better than that.
You know what? Is there any additional business? Okay, well, if there's not any additional business, I will entertain the motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Secretary
Trustee
Brown?
Chapman?
Yes.
Trustee Norfleet?
Yes.
Trustee Qualls?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Trauber?
Yes.
Chair Winton?
Yes.
Trustee Young-Sigler?
Yes.
Trustee Smith-Knight?
Yes.
Thank you.